Hi, Senator. Thank you so much for joining me today. Really appreciate you sitting down and talking with us.
Thanks for having me, Jodi.
So I know you've been an advocate for tech education for a long time. Why is that, and what is the interest in, manufacturing more generally?
Well, so I actually think it actually comes in part from my family. My grandfather was a tool and die maker. My grandfather on my mother's side was a longshoreman on the Brooklyn waterfront. And what I saw was, in particular, as a tool and die maker, my grandfather's family on my dad's side, is he was able to support a family of 5 in New York City, of all places, put his kids through, good meals on the table, family vacations, not a fancy life, but a good, solid middle-class life with real security and real comfort for his family, doing that through manufacturing. Historically, for the United States of America, manufacturing has been the engine of mobility for generations of immigrants, of new Americans who have come here, who have worked in our factories, making textiles, making machine parts, making automobiles. They've made money, they've been able to save, they've been able to improve life for the next generation. And Western Mass in particular has an unbelievable legacy of manufacturing. Ever since George Washington put the armory in Springfield, Massachusetts to help protect the United States, the nascent United States during the Revolutionary War, we've been a major center for manufacturing, and generations of our people in the Pioneer Valley have made things. We're really a community that makes things, and we still do.
And how can we continue that if we have waiting lists of schools or kids trying to get into these schools? How can we change that? And what can the state do to change
So,
that?
we know the story, unfortunately, all too well in Western Mass, which is a generation, 2 generations ago, the Pioneer Valley was filled with companies making all types of different elements of what made American life great. Uniroyal Tires was here, Chapman Valve, Eastman Kodak, American Bosch, incredible iconic companies. Indian Motorcycles, of course, all had a presence here in Western Mass. We also know what happened, which is as the economy changed, a lot of those jobs and opportunity left Western Mass. And so we were left with a major deficit in manufacturing in our area and a lot of people who were struggling to find work. Unfortunately, what happened during that period is a lot of our schools took their eye off of manufacturing and how potent it could be as a way to build a strong and a meaningful middle-class life for people. But what we've seen in recent years is a rebirth of that manufacturing acumen, that manufacturing heritage, but in advanced manufacturing. So instead of making Uniroyal tires or Westinghouse electric components, now we're making in Western Mass the components for solar panels. We're making the components for aircraft engines. We're making the machine parts for all types of highly complex pieces of machinery that really power the new economy. And unfortunately, though, the downside to that is we have a huge gap in the number of people we've got in Western Mass with the skills necessary to get those jobs. This is a huge opportunity for us. Just in the Pioneer Valley alone, we have thousands of vacant positions in things like precision machining, CAD/CAM programming, 3D printing at local companies that are ready to put people to work right now, making wages that are $20, $25, even $30 an hour just to start. And part of the challenge we have, Jodi, which you've alluded to, is our career and technical schools are doing amazing work, but they are at capacity. And we actually have waiting lists at all of our schools around Western Mass to do things like precision machining, advanced welding, CNC machine operating. Again, these are fantastic jobs. You can make $70, $80, even $100,000 a year without 6-figure student loan debt. We've got to do more to close that waiting list so that every young person, and even people in the middle of their careers who are looking to make that transition into manufacturing, have the chance to do that.
Can you talk to me about how, the money that would come in from GE that they have to pay back the state could help solve that problem, or at least that's a proposal that you've put forward?
Yeah, so I put an idea on the table, which is, look, the state all of the time hands out tens of millions of dollars in incentives to some of the biggest, wealthiest corporations in the world to locate in places that frankly are already booming and already creating thousands and thousands of high-paying jobs. The GE deal in particular was to locate GE in Fort Point Channel in Boston, which is an area that already has a very hot real estate market, already has a very hot employment market. And quite frankly, that incentive was from the top down. It was going to be handed out to the GE executives. and was probably going to be seen by shareholders who don't even live in Massachusetts. So we saw that deal kind of fall apart, and as part of the change and the reneging, frankly, on the commitment that GE had made to the state, GE was literally handing a check back, a refund basically, to Massachusetts for the money that had been committed for that deal. And it was a lot of money. It was a check for $87 million. And one of the things I've said is, look, if we were going to be spending $87 million to bring GE to Four Point Channel in Boston, we could spend that $87 million on literally unlocking thousands of jobs and thousands of opportunities for people in every corner of the state doing things like precision welding, CAD/CAM programming, 3D printing, precision machining, a whole host of jobs that are available right now locally for our local people. We need to close the voc ed waiting list, the waiting list that's at all of our career technical schools around the state. We could use that money to buy new machines, to open new classroom space, to hire new teachers. There is no reason a talented, committed young person who wants to get into one of these programs should be on a waiting list, especially when we have shortages at so many of our local employers in Western Mass and actually around the whole Commonwealth.
And we see this problem happening across the country where rural communities don't feel that they're getting the attention they need outside of, what's happening in the city. How do we change that? Is it rail? Is it reinvesting in, manufacturing jobs? Is it educating the younger generations about other opportunities?
I think that's such an important question, Jodi, and I really view this as part of a broader strategy. Look, we've had just in our lifetimes, really, like since we've been born, you've seen unbelievable changes in how the economy operates. And Massachusetts, in many respects, has been on the receiving end, a beneficiary of those changes. Our hospitals have flourished, our biotech sector, our life sciences sector is the envy of the world. As a whole, the statistics for Massachusetts look very good. Our jobless rate is one of the lowest in the entire country, but we know that doesn't tell the whole story, and we definitely know that in Western Mass, because as the economy changed, we saw a vacuuming out of communities all around Massachusetts into the Boston core and hyper-focused on a handful of industries, really healthcare, education, high-tech oriented industries. And if we want to be serious about making sure that the gains of all of this economic growth we're seeing are spread out to communities like Springfield or Chicopee or Pittsfield or Greenfield or any of the communities in Western Mass that had a proud manufacturing heritage, we need to reinvest in those communities. That means fantastic schools like Putnam Voc Ed School in Springfield getting the resources it needs to close its waiting list. That means getting the support to Chicopee Comp so that all of these fantastic students that are ready to get to work, are ready to go work at one of these local employers, get the training they need. It means supporting our community college initiatives like at Springfield Technical Community College, for example, which has one of the best advanced manufacturing training programs in the entire country. We need to make sure that they can continue to get every student who needs a spot, wants a spot in that program, getting them access to one. And we need to do some big infrastructure changes. I've talked quite a lot, you and I have talked quite a lot about rail. We cannot continue to have an economy and a state that vacuums the jobs and opportunity into one place. Frankly, it's not good for Boston, as the Boston City Council pointed out last week, because it's contributing to runaway gentrification, runaway housing prices, out of control traffic, and it's certainly not good for communities like Western Mass, because we've seen a lot of our young people have to leave because they can't find work in the communities where they grew up in, and that's not good for anyone. So, we need to think broadly, we need to think holistically about these challenges, and we need to see how they're all interrelated. But one advantage we have right now that we could literally do today is close the waiting list for our vocational and technical education, because every day, Jodi, one of the most frustrating things about my job is almost every day I'll meet with an employer, I'll meet with someone who owns a local factory, owns a local business somewhere in the Pioneer Valley, who will tell me that they have a waiting list, that they have a list of open positions, pages long sometimes, good jobs, $20, $25, $30 an hour jobs that they can't fill. And then sometimes the very next meeting is a young person who's struggling, who can't find work, or a family who can't make ends meet on the job that they have. That gap between the jobs that we have and the community that's looking for work is a huge challenge. And it's something I'm very committed to working on and solving. And it's something that government, and our state government in particular, needs to be focused on. The connective tissue between those two places is our career and vocational and technical education community, our community colleges, our voc ed schools. We need to make sure that they have the resources that they need, and that $87 million that GE is returning would do a lot to close that gap.
I want to switch gears a little bit. Millennials get a bad rap for being lazy or, technologically driven, but most of our lives, college has been pushed on us. How can we change that at a high school or even elementary school level to get people involved in manufacturing jobs?
Yeah, I think that that's so important. I think that there's a cultural issue, frankly, because I think that for a generation, we were told, something I encounter quite a lot is families were told the whole arc of their kid's life that your child has to go to college to be a success. And we know that's not true. You need a skill to be a success. If you learn a skill, if you learn a trade, you're going to be valuable no matter what letters come after your name. And we need to change that mindset. We need to change the culture around that in our communities and in our state. So that includes, I think, things like getting the word out. One of the greatest things we do is we'll bring young people on tours of some of our local manufacturers, and we'll walk them through the parking lot, and they'll see all the brand new cars, the brand new pickup trucks that the workers are purchasing with their great salaries and their great incomes. And usually a 20-year-old young person who hasn't had trouble with their card payments is going to look around the parking lot and say, wait a second, I gotta figure out a way to get this job. So some of it is bringing it to people's level, making sure that the programs are approachable. We've got to get more schools integrated into these training centers. The employers have a role to play. The business community has a role to play with getting the word out. But I do think very importantly that the tune is starting to change on this, Jodi, because we've seen actually concurrently to all of this an absolutely out of control student debt crisis. And we need to do more to address that. In other countries, in Germany, for example, an 18, 19-year-old can do apprenticeships while they're in high school. They get them slotted right into a really high-paying job, at a big manufacturing facility, making really cool stuff. Solar panels, aircraft engine components, the parts for hydroelectric dams. There's a company in Holyoke I toured recently that's making components for the NASA space stations. Very, very cool work. So that's the final element, which is, I think our generation, we want to be part of big, cool stuff, right? Our culture is entrepreneurial. It's about tech. It's about being transformative and disruptive and how we get things going. Manufacturing right now is in the center of so much of that. So if you come and work in the manufacturing field, if you get trained as a precision machinist, for example, well, you're going to have a role to play in building, high-speed trains. You're going to have a role to play in building solar components. You're going to have a role to play in building high-performance batteries, which are key to the clean energy revolution. You're going to have a role to play in, building engine parts for supersonic jets. I mean, this is the bedrock of what our modern economy is going to be relying on. You're going to be part of making the components, the infrared and photonic components for autonomous vehicles, for robotics. Just so much great path-breaking, forward-reaching work is happening in our machining and in our manufacturing sectors. We need young people to know it, and we need to get the word out about that. So, for example, we have a program, the Manufacturing Extension Partnership, and another program called AMP, which is the nickname is Amp It Up, which is all about getting the word out about the manufacturing economy in Massachusetts, getting the word out to young people in particular. They need to know that it's not their grandfather's manufacturing. You're not going to be sitting in a dark room pulling a crank all day. You're going to be working with advanced machinery. Some of the machines cost hundreds, even millions of dollars that you're going to be in charge of as a 19-year-old. You're going to be making components for a rocket launch that goes into outer space and orbits the Earth. If there's any error, people's lives will be at risk. So this is important work, and it's at the core of what our modern economy is all about.
How do we deter students from accruing, as we were just talking about, student loan debt to go into a major that doesn't necessarily have the type of financial outcome that a manufacturing job does? How do we interest people in working with machinery rather than working behind a desk?
I think the most important element is that we got to do a couple things. Number one, we have to sound the alarm on the student debt crisis, and we've been doing that with our student loan bill of rights. That is very important. I don't think a lot of 17 or 18-year-olds, frankly, appreciate what those loans will mean, and it's very unfair. You know, when my parents went to college, they went to City College in New York. My mom went to school little by little as she worked as a secretary. The tuition was a couple $100s a semester. You know, the era of being able to pay for school through scooping ice cream or babysitting or working odd jobs, being a lifeguard, you know, all the sort of rites of passage of young people in America are becoming a thing of the past. No one can afford a $60,000 or $70,000 tuition bill by working part-time, you know, unless I need to know the part-time job if that's what they're doing. So, you know, we need to get the word out about that, and we need to explain to people that there are other options. I don't think that that's an excuse for solving the debt crisis. We need to do that. We need to do a lot more to bring the cost of college down. We need to invest more in our public schools. That's absolutely a given. But what we also need to do is give people some genuine options, you know, which is if you like working with your hands, not everybody wants to go to four-year college, or should. So if you like working with your hands, if you're someone who enjoys, you know, building things, you know, my grandfather was like that. You know, he was always tinkering and building things and fixing things around the house, and that was what he enjoyed. Well, you know, manufacturing is a great field. You can make quite a lot of money, be very successful doing that. So we gotta get the word out. We gotta do more marketing. We do need our schools to become more nimble and to better integrate the local employer base and getting those employers into the school. So I'll give you an example. A couple of years ago, Lower Pioneer Valley Education Collaborative, which is based in West Springfield but serves about a dozen school districts all around the Pioneer Valley. I have, I believe, 5 of my towns contribute students to this collaborative. They had a shop on automotive, they had a shop on horticulture, they had a cosmetology program. One program they didn't have was advanced manufacturing, you know, precision machining, CNC machine operating. So they brought me on a tour of the facility, and they showed me a big empty room, bigger than the room we're in right now. It was totally empty. And they said, we have the space, we want to put CNC machines in here to train the young people in how to do CNC machining. And I said, okay, well, how much would it cost? It was about $500,000 that they needed in additional funds to get the equipment in and get the room set up. This is a $41 billion budget. Shame on us if we can't find a way to make that work. So we went out, we put a great team together, Western Mass delegation, all worked together to make it happen. Fast forward a year later, they had the equipment in, they graduated their first class. And very importantly, the teachers are folks who also work in local industry. So the students are getting taught the skill, they're learning and building a new mentorship, you know, they have a new mentor, working with a local teacher, and now they also have a professional contact who can say to them, hey, I got a spot for you at the company down the street I work at. They've had a more than 90% placement rate for those students, and the average wage for those students is well over $18, $20 an hour, includes benefits, and very importantly, includes a path for promotion. Those 18 and 19-year-old students in a few years will be foremen, maybe one day will be running their own shop. And that's one of the things that I really tried to get across to them.
What do you see for the future of the Commonwealth and, more importantly, the country if we don't reinvest in these types of jobs?
Well, we're going to see a hollowing out of our middle class. You know, I'm very, very concerned about this. I think that the challenge in our economy right now is, I think we figured out how to grow the economy in the sense that the pie keeps getting bigger and bigger, the stock market keeps going up and up and up, but the division of that pie is getting narrower and narrower and narrower. And just in our lifetimes, you've seen an explosion of income inequality. You've seen a very small group of people at the very, very top of the income ladder making more and more and more while everybody else is struggling. And quite frankly, it's even compounded by the fact that wages have basically been stagnant, but the cost of everything else has gone up. Healthcare costs are going up. Cost of college, as we talked about, has gone up. Cost of housing has gone up. So the typical middle-class family that's working hard, even with 2 incomes, mother and father both working, are looking at their bills every month. They're not living fancy life, and they're saying, how are we supposed to make all of this work when you add up healthcare, when you add up the cost of education, when you add up the cost of energy, you name it. That is the challenge, is how do we not only protect the middle class we have, but try to create more ladders of opportunity for more people to get into the middle class. And we can't do that without manufacturing, because manufacturing was really the sector that built the American middle class, the Industrial Revolution. It's what made America America. And if we move towards an economy that has a small sliver of people at the top, maybe working in high tech, working in some very specific advanced fields in finance, and everybody else working in a service-based economy, you're going to have a huge gap, and that's going to be a society that I don't think any of us will like, and won't serve our communities well. I think the other thing to kind of point out with this is there's a lot of pride in manufacturing, and I don't think we should lose sight of that, which is at the end of the day, after you work a full day, you can look at the line you've been working on and you can see the products you've made. And how fulfilling is that? I remember my grandfather used to, when I was little, he would talk with a lot of pride about the engine parts he helped fix when he was in the Merchant Marines in World War II, and how relied on he was to fix those parts, to get the tools ready, because he was part of a team that relied on each other. And he was able to look at the engine, he was able to look at the ship he was working on and say, I helped build that. That's a really special thing. When you talk to people in the building trades, for example, they get to drive around and say, I worked on that building, or you see that bridge, I helped build that bridge, or you see that big skyscraper, I helped put that skyscraper together. That's incalculable, the value of that. That's not dollars and cents, that's about pride and work and giving people a sense of meaning and a sense of purpose.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Senator, for
Thank
sitting
you.
down with me today. Always a pleasure to chat with you, and I look forward to continuing this.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you.